Well, I didn't quite hear what the question was, but certainly things have come to a pretty pass.
Let me put the question back to you again. BBC.com goes, what the $1 trillion pledge really costs. What does it really cost? Where is the money coming from? I mean, how is this? This is financing. This is not real cash, is it?
Yeah, well, yes. Well, the 750 of the 1 trillion will be IMF money, and that ultimately comes from the banking system. This is all one big game. Money comes from the banking system at interest, but it does not have to come at interest. The whole process can be done without interest for a start, and then you must secondly look at where the real economy is addressed, and in particular the development and spreading of the real economy. The 250 of special drawing rights is actually really rather sinister. It could be the start of one global currency, which will be controlled and run by the banks with the object of putting the whole world into debt. Of course, if we do have to take an IMF loan, it will, of course, be a disgrace. It was a complete bankruptcy of all British policy, though, of course, quite whether the IMF will then put in the very stringent terms for lending that they put on all the poor countries is another question. Max is right to raise this issue, and I thank him.
All right, we will also take a look at Forbes.com. So what was achieved at the G20 meeting? And it goes, the $1 trillion the leaders claim to have injected into the world economy amounts to spend in two respects. Not all of it is really additional. Up to $250 billion to $300 billion was probably already in the pipeline. But the real obfuscation is to compare this $1 trillion with the fiscal stimulus of $5 trillion they have already provided. This $1 trillion of dollars of additional resources is financing. It will not necessarily produce $1 trillion of additional spending. It will only produce extra spending in those countries that are currently constrained by a lack of foreign exchange resources. So the $1 trillion will not lead to additional stimulus in the U.S. or Europe, Japan, China, or many emerging market economies. Is that the case, Max?
Oh, it's just more accounting fraud. In other words, the way the economy has been moving, and in the UK they know this very well because they sacrificed their manufacturing base and their mining, and they squandered their North Sea oil reserves, and they decided to become the hedge fund capital of the world and the concierge for all the money launderers and money shysters and financial terrorists from America found a home in Britain. Now that the game is blown up, interest rates are no longer accommodating this money laundering in Britain and the divine right of hedge funds. I thought Britain got rid of the divine right of kings back in 1649 with the elimination of Charles I. They replaced it with the divine right of hedge funds. They need to get rid of these hedge funds who consider themselves above the law, and they need to get back to some kind of rule of law. And these money that's being thrown around, the numbers, is pure fraud. They're going to use the IMF now to become the new venue to launder all these debts through the IMF. So the IMF is just going to be the new receptacle for all this money to be dumped into the IMF. They're going to repackage it. They're going to take a fee, again, the same financial oligarchs that have seized the system in the UK and the US. They're going to just simply repackage the debts, dump them into the IMF, and say that this is somehow making progress by fighting debt with more debt. That's insanity, and they're destroying the global economy.
Professor Shakespeare, tell us about IMF. That seems to be one of the biggest winners, if you will, with Strauss-Kahn really happy about it, saying simply IMF is back. Now, strengthening our global financial institutions was high on agenda. This part of the communique. It says, we commit to implementing the package of IMF quota and voice reforms agreed in April 2008. It goes on and on. We commit to implementing the World Bank reforms agreed in October 2008. We agree that heads and senior leadership of international financial institutions should be appointed through an open, transparent, and merit-based selection process. This is touted as a big change, but Forbes again says very noteworthy is the fact that even the reference to appointing heads of institutions does not contain the key code words without reference to nationality. This means the same would go to the Europeans and the Americans as far as the World Bank is concerned.
Look, don't be taken in by this talk of strengthening the international institutions. What's really happening is we are now bolstering the divine rights of the financial oligarchs. if you look at the people around President Obama, they're virtually all Wall Street. They're not from industry, they're not from the retired, they're not from environment, they're not from women, they're from Wall Street. And they all seem to have links to the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission on the Council for Foreign Relations. And that is the real reality. The financial oligarchs are on top. The financial oligarchs are running this scene. The financial oligarchs are behind the IMF. And as a result of this G20, they have actually strengthened their position in this world, and everybody is falling for it. What a mistake.
All right, now speaking of Obama, United Press International, Obama G20 claims success while joblessness up. And this against a backdrop, if you just Google U.S. economy, what you're getting is U.S. jobless rate hits 8.5%, highest level since 1983, talking about 663,000 more jobs lost, so on and so forth. Dark cloud over U.S. jobless data all the way down. So simply grim headlines. But let's take a look at his optimism voiced at the summit.
We finished a very productive summit that will be, I believe, a turning point in our pursuit of global economic recovery. Today, we've learned the lessons of history. I know that in the days leading up to the summit, some of you in the press, some commentators confused honest and open debate with irreconcilable differences. But after weeks of preparation and 2 days of careful negotiation, we have agreed on a series of unprecedented steps to restore growth and prevent a crisis like this from happening again.
Max, quite an optimistic note out there.